coming in from the waiting room, please use the chat function to introduce yourselves, your title and affiliate organizations. Okay. All right, recording now, and let's get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first office hours for the California Digital Equity Program, or CalDEP. On behalf of the state of California and the Department of Technology, we thank you for being here. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Next slide, please. This meeting is being recorded. Along with the recording, the presentation slides and minutes will be posted on our portal. A member of our team will add that link in the chat very shortly. Office hours are public meetings and will be open to any potential applicant that chooses to join. Please note that CDT cannot answer questions that are specific to an individual application. CDT may also collect some questions not addressed live during the session and respond at a later date. A link will be provided in the chat where you can expect to see our Q&As posted. So select side-by-side speaker mode for the best viewing experience. For Q&A, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your toolbar to type in any questions. Please use the raise hand icon when we begin our Q&A session, or *9 if you're calling in by phone. Our team will elevate you and request that you come off mute or video. We're also aware that there has been system-wide Zoom glitches, so if we do face that issue while this office hours is happening, we will let you know and communicate via email. And next slide, please. For our agenda, in a moment, our broadband and digital literacy broadband administrative manager, James Spencer, will provide a welcome remarks and our office hours overview. Mr. Alex Bond from Broadband Equity Partnership will provide a brief summary of Track 1 and Track 2. OBDL's Access and Deployment Advisor, Maria Kelly, will help facilitate the live Q&A. And lastly, you'll see me again to close out the session with a few reminders of where you can find resources and any next steps. So first, I would like to bring up Mr. James Spencer.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, everybody. As Anne said, my name is James Spencer. I am the Administrative Manager of the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. We are pleased to have you join us for the first California Digital Equity Program office hours session. We specifically appreciate your partnership and engagement, and thank you for joining us today. Next slide, please. So before we begin the discussion portion of office hours, there are a few key points I want to highlight to help manage facilitation. The format of office hours allows for eligible applicants to ask questions related to the RFA process and timeline, guidelines, components, and requirements. Because we're in an open application period, OBDL cannot give advice or answer questions that are specific to individual applications. OBDL will respond to questions referencing existing materials when possible and as applicable. Applicable questions that cannot be answered live will be recorded and responded to via written Q&A, accessible via the Q&A webpage. Next slide, please. So I also want to highlight some key dates and application information to help clarify any confusion and minimize questions in this area. So the California Digital Equity Program request for application was launched on March 26, 2025, with a 66-day open application period. All CalDEP information can be found through the Broadband for All portal by following the Initiatives drop-down tab. The CalDEP webpage includes the grant guidelines and RFA and all associated materials. This is also where you can find the grant application portal. As a reminder, we have a strict cutoff for applications, which must be submitted by May 30th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And we will only be accepting applications through the CalDEP application portal. Next slide, please. So today's focus is CalDEP office hours, which will provide an opportunity for you to ask and receive responses to generalized questions. We also highly encourage all interested parties to review the additional resources OBDL has developed, which can help answer immediate questions as you navigate the application process. These critical resources can be accessed through the CalDEP Technical Assistance Resources webpage. There you can find written resources, which are reference documents to assist in the application and development process. This includes application guidance and checklists, a one-pager with key information, and additional guidance on allowable costs and procurement requirements. You can also find past event presentation materials, as well as pre-recorded videos on content on specific topics regarding the RFA and the application process. To help facilitate the Q&A process, OBDL developed a dedicated inbox to submit questions about the RFA and application process. Q&A will be posted on a rolling basis with a final deadline to submit questions by May 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. I do want to note that we appreciate the time that entities have taken to submit questions. Many questions are similar or duplicative, so we are doing our best to summarize questions and provide general responses based on approved information, given that this is in our open RFA period. Lastly, the Partnership Coordination Resource is a tool for lead entities to find potential partners and for smaller or partner organizations to be found by lead organizations. So if you're an eligible entity and looking to amplify partnership reach, participation is encouraged. I will now pass the spotlight to Alex, who will provide additional clarity on funding tracks.
All right, thanks, James. So as James mentioned, before we get into the question and answer period or the discussion portion of today's office hours, just wanted to provide a quick summary of the two funding tracks. We know there's a lot of information in the RFA, and information on each track may be spread out across different sections. So just have a couple of slides to summarize high level, key information about each funding track, and hopefully provide some more clarification on what tracks 1 and 2 are all about. Next slide. So track 1 is the track that focuses on funding regional or local digital equity ecosystems in terms of planning and capacity. And there's a total funding pool in track 1 of $43 million for the entire state of California. So the purpose of track 1 is to develop and refine regional and local digital equity plans. And then once those plans are in place, provide capacity for organizations to implement digital equity activities, either directly themselves or through second-tier subgrants. So the funding for track 1 is based on a formula allocation for every county as a geographic boundary. So if you look in the RFA, Section 7 has the allocation for every single county in California. It's important to note that CDT will only award one application per county funding allocation. So if we award one application for a county that has a total allocation of $215,000, that application will receive the $215,000 and be expected to work across the county. So with that in mind, really want to encourage lead applicants to form partnerships with entities, interested entities, right, who serve covered populations or are interested in digital equity across the county boundary to partner up and submit one application together. And lead applicants may also partner with entities across multiple counties to submit one application for multiple county funding allocations. So as far as requirements for track 1, first off, track 1 applicants, if awarded, must either develop or refine regional or local digital equity plans that will align with the SDEP and meet the minimum requirements as laid out in the RFA. And you can find more information about that in Section 5 under the regional and local digital equity planning section. So these plans must be completed and be approved by CDT before CalDEP awards may be used for implementation of digital equity activities. And these plans must outline strategies, key activities, and measurable objectives to benefit members of all covered populations within the county and also in alignment with the SDEP or the State Digital Equity Plan. Once those plans are in place and are approved, track 1 subgrantees may move on to implementation of local digital equity activities. that would align with the SSTEP measurable objectives and regional local digital equity plan. Track 1 subgrantees are also expected to form coalitions or partnerships with key stakeholders for planning and implementation. And as part of the application process, they must submit more than one letter of intent or letter of support from partners and stakeholders from the county and region. And finally, second-tier subgranting to other eligible entities within the county or region to assist with implementation is optional, but highly encouraged, especially in the larger counties with the larger funding allocations. So as far as the Track 1 model or a competitive application, it first starts with having a lead applicant with the experience, reach, and partnerships across the entire county that they're applying for or multi-county region. And this lead applicant should also have experience with managing large initiatives, managing federal or state grants, and, if proposed, making grants or subgrants to other organizations. The model application should also include local partners representing covered populations and digital equity practitioners. It should reflect an understanding amongst the entire applicant team of the digital equity landscape in the county or region. The application should align with the SSTEP's goals, measurable objectives, targets, implementation strategy, and key activities. And the model application would have second-tier subgrants to community partners and digital equity practitioners to implement activities and strengthen the local digital equity ecosystem. So that's Track 1, right? Focus on regional and local digital equity ecosystem planning and capacity with allocations at the county level. Next slide, please. Next, just want to quickly touch on Track 2. So Track 2 is for targeted statewide digital equity ecosystems that focus on either a specific covered population or a specific outcome area. And this track has a total funding pool of $7 million. So within that total funding pool of $7 million, CDT plans to make awards in the range of $400,000 to $1 million, and up to 14 awards are expected. So as far as requirements for Track 2, this track is really for ecosystem development, capacity building, or digital equity innovation at a statewide level that would benefit either a specific covered population or a specific outcome area. Track 2 applicants must also have a plan for coordinating, supporting, and sharing best practices with Track 1 subgrantees so that their work makes an impact at the regional and local levels. Track 2 subgrantees must also participate in the statewide implementation group or other communities of practice established by CDT, and must show a plan for stakeholder engagement across the entire state. And as part of their application, they must submit more than one letter of intent or support from partners or stakeholders from across California. So the model application for Track 2 is similar to Track 1, but really reflects the shift in focus from regional and local to the statewide level. So the lead applicant for Track 2 for a model application would have experience, reach, and partnerships across the state's diverse regions that would specialize in working with the specific covered population or the specific outcome area. The Track 2 lead applicant should also have experience managing large initiatives and federal or state grants. The Track 2 model application would have local partners representing covered populations and digital equity practitioners, and really reflect a plan for large-scale statewide digital equity implementation or ecosystem development, or a very innovative idea for digital equity that could be applied statewide to benefit the covered population or outcome area. And finally, the model Track 2 application has to demonstrate why the specific covered population or outcome area that they're applying for is better served at the statewide level instead of the regional or local level. So that's Track 2, right? Really focusing on statewide digital equity ecosystems benefiting a specific covered population or a specific outcome area. So with that, I'll pass it to Maria, who will help us lead and moderate the question and answer period.
Thank you, Alex. We do have a few questions, and we'll just get started. I might ask for some of those, for some of you that typed a question into the QA, I may ask you to raise your hand and ask your question live so that we can make sure we're understanding your questions. So first of all, we'll start with, apologies, but we'll start with the question about the federal funding freeze, and we'll take that off. We always try to get that off the table first. So the question is, if the administration decides to freeze the Digital Equity Act, how will this impact the CalDEP grant?
Thank you for the question. This is a federally funded program, so our ability to the Department of Technology's ability to fulfill on the grants is going to be dependent on our access to the funds that we're obligated by the federal government.
Thank you. There's a question, I think probably for Alex. The funding is specific for a school district, asking if funding could be used for just a dual immersion program or just a school district within a school within a county.
Yeah, so with track, I'm assuming they're thinking about track one, but again, looking at the track one summary, right? The idea is to select a lead applicant who can work across the entire county or multi-county region that they're applying for. And first they must establish a regional or local digital equity plan that lays out, understands the needs of the covered populations within their county or region, lays out key strategies and measurable objectives for addressing those needs, and is in alignment with the goals and measurable objectives and strategies of the State Digital Equity Plan. So we really want to encourage folks to take a look at the State Digital Equity Plan, take a look at the goals and the objectives laid out. It's pretty specific, right? There's targets and baselines, areas where we want to move the needle when it comes to digital equity. And the local plans, should work in alignment with the State Digital Equity Plan while taking into context like what the local needs are. And these plans from there should define, right, what types of digital equity activities they're going to invest in. And once that plan is approved, they can go ahead and start implementing the activities. So I just wanted to clarify that, track one isn't, it has to be a holistic program for the county. It's not for like a more kind of standalone or one-off type program.
Yeah, and Alex, thanks for that. I would just want to add that, the development of the Digital Equity Plan followed some pretty specific guidance from the NTIA, which was, in the Digital Equity Plan that Alice referred to, focusing on the common digital equity barriers experienced by Californians associated with either access or availability of infrastructure, the affordability of internet services and devices, and then the constraints and barriers around broadband adoption. So really the focus for track one applications, like Alex said, is developing local plans that align with addressing those sort of three barrier categories. And there's some really specific allowable uses that are in the RFA and on the Q&A page.
Thank you, Scott. And some of these questions, we want to let you know that some of the questions we'll be able to answer now. Some of them we may ask you to submit via the CalDEP email. So if we aren't able to provide an answer during these office hours, please follow up with us and submit via our CalDEP email. There's a question regarding matching funds. Can you please confirm that there's not a monetary in-kind match component to the CalDEP grant?
Yeah, I can confirm. There is no matching requirement for our program.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add too is, the guidance from the NTA on the digital equity capacity grants are that, they focus on all covered populations, that they focus on lasting and meaningful change, that they focus on sustainability and stakeholder engagement. And what we would say about this funding is we know that, it's relatively large amount of funding, but when you look at the need in the state of California, it's not probably as big as the need is there. So a large focus of the digital equity plans is going to be asking track one and track one or track two awardees to identify other sources of funding that they could leverage, either state or federal funding or local philanthropic or private sector funding to extend and sustain their programs.
Thank you, Scott. And again, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question live. We can take live questions. We'll continue to go what was posted in chat or via the Q&A box. But again, please feel free to raise your hands. There's a question regarding second tier or subgrantees. And the question is specifically for a county. Are different departments within the county considered a second tier subgrantee? Is the distinction if they have their own UEI number?
I think we're gonna have to take that
Come back.
down,
Okay.
and circle back on that, but we really appreciate the distinction, and I wanna make sure, like Maria said, this is an open office hours, and we would encourage people to, when you raise your hand, we'll unmute you if you could provide greater context, because we admit we've gotten a lot of questions that are, fairly similar, but, kind of nuanced and different. So our understanding is, like, say a county government were to come in as a track one and wanted to disperse funding out to a county department, as a track tier subgrantee, would that be permissible? And I'm wondering if the person can, come on and just say, did we understand the question as asked?
Yeah, it's anonymous, so I'm not sure who to call out on that
Okay.
one. So if you would like to raise your hand and unmute, then we can make sure we're understanding the question. In the meantime, Joel Block, if you would unmute and come on camera and please answer your question.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep.
So I was about to ask, are there any guidelines or regulations providing for disabled individuals who operate nonprofits for serving disabled communities? I'm the executive director of a nonprofit that has been serving the seriously mental illness and also stroke survivors. I didn't know if I couldn't see anything so far in terms of digital outreach for those type of very vulnerable communities who need to access the new digital opportunities. And if I'm too vague, I just trying to figure out where in the regs or the guidelines there may be something.
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that. I think absolutely, nonprofits that focus on digital equity efforts, focusing on the disabled population, are encouraged to participate as partners in either track one grants or potentially track two grants that are focusing specifically on one of the covered populations, and individuals with disabilities is a member of a covered population. I think the distinction here, sir, would be that we would recommend that if possible, you go to the partner coordination resource and enter your information and desire to participate as a partner in a track one application. Just kind of clearly define what county or geographic region you're in, so that would, and further ask you to reach out to entities that are focusing or considering being leads on applications in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Robert, I'm sorry if I say your last name incorrectly, Makhlouf. Makhlouf. If you would, you're free to ask your question.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I have actually two questions. The first question about the challenge process. The thing at the time that we looked at the map for the location that's eligible for the BEAD fund, we found that this map is incorrect. At that time, I tried to submit the request through the portal, but unfortunately, it required some delegation from the console. And at the time that I get the delegation, it became too late. So I don't know if there is still time to fix that. This is the first question. The second question, Yes.
Can we address, let us address the first question, okay? So on the BEAD program, or the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the CDT works very closely with the Public Utilities Commission on all things broadband related. And the California Public Utilities Commission is administering the BEAD program. So Mr. McLoof will make sure that you have the staff email contact for the BEAD program, and they would be the entity to directly contact about any challenges to locations. But that's kind of separate of the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, which, while it's a companion, BEAD is about deployment of infrastructure, and the CalDEP program and the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant program are for non-deployment purposes.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The other question is about the broadband that will be funded by this grant. Like we have situation in Tule River tribe that the council really pay for all the service. So we provide fiber to home to all residents, to all the community for free of charge. Now, is there any requirement, like if we get benefit from this grant, to be like mandatory to charge people for the service, or we still able to offer the service to them for free?
I think we're going to need to take that one back. However, in general, what I would say is kind of related to the last question that you had. The State Digital Equity Capacity Grant, of which the Department of Technology received, and the California Digital Equity Program, which is in essence the subgrant program for that, there's a prohibition on construction and deployment of infrastructure. And so those programs are really the focus of either the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, which the Department of Technology is doing, or many of the Public Utilities Commission's last mile programs, be it the California Advanced Service Fund, or the federal funding account, or the BEAD program.
Thank you, Scott. We don't currently have any other hands raised. And some of these questions look familiar that we may be answering on the portal. I think we posted our first questions yesterday. We'll continue to post Q&A on the portal. There's a question about devices for staff, and I'm wondering if maybe we can direct somewhere within the RFA or within the grant the devices allowed for program activities.
Yeah, James or Alex, do you want to take that one?
James, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so more information on devices can be found in Section 5 of the RFA, eligible use of funds and program requirements, as well as additional information in the allowable versus unallowable cost document.
And a follow-up to that is, so the person, and I'm trying to scroll through here, someone asked about tablets and cell phones sort of lumped together as allowable devices. And I believe that can also be found in the RFA, correct?
I think we've got a couple of questions on that about we're taking under consideration or under advisement some of the questions we received about potentially further dividing devices. And so we acknowledge that for many individuals impacted by the digital divide, that mobile phones are their primary use. However, the spirit of Broadband for All and the Internet for All program and in these is really about computing devices. So would recommend that when we're generally thinking about devices, that it's, we're thinking about things beyond mobile phones that have greater ability to optimize web-based applications and and other functions that support the kind of the further out outcomes that we're required to work towards around education or workforce development, access to essential services, et cetera.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, encourage people to check out the RFA. Some of these questions are really great questions. They are outlined, and we can provide some direction to where to find them within the RFA, but some of the specifics, you should be able to find. The questions are available, the answers are available within the RFA on the portal. And I believe we're dropping that link in the chat. A question about planning materials. Would CDT allow shared planning materials or assets like needs assessments or deem entries to be used across both tracks if we end up having a potential partners? And this is really almost more specific to an ask about a project, but the question is, can we use both if we have a potential partner with track 1 planning and track 2 ecosystem building?
Yeah,
And I'm not really clear on that
Natalie
question.
Gonzalez asked that question, and
yeah, Natalie, can you
and
come
has
up?
a hand up. Natalie, we'd love to better understand your question.
Yeah, I actually had a different question, but to go over that first one, was just wondering around the resources and materials, knowing that track 1 and track 2 kind of are complement to each other, and they kind of work in a way where track 1 is informing track 2 of the digital equity plan and how that approach is supported statewide. Is that going to be relied on the partners to kind of do that connected and sharing of resources, or will CDT kind of have like a hub where that info can be accessible to track 1 partners?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Natalie, if you don't mind me calling you by your first name.
Sure.
The way we designed this program, and this really came out of the planning process, was understanding that while the bulk of the work is going to be done at the the county and the local level, that there are efficiencies that the state can do in terms of developing common tools and resources, and that would include the digital equity public survey that's available online and by mobile phone, and developing outreach materials, doing translation at a higher level so that those could be both common but customizable for folks. And we will say that there will be a template digital equity plan, like either a checklist for folks that already have digital equity plans that just want to say, like, do these align with the state plan, or a template that's really kind of based on the state digital equity plan. And so yes, that is part of the role that the department is taking on, to provide those centralized resources, while also acknowledging that there are some unique community needs, and that's why there's a cap on planning, and really the lion's share needs to go to programmatic, and we'll allow flexibility for the track 1 subgrantees to develop or procure tools specific to their communities. And did you have another question? I think you did. Luke, can we unmute Natalie again?
Thank you. Yeah, just the last question, knowing that this grant goes until 2029 timeline wise, given I think all of the uncertainty, my question is around the reimbursement process. Should disruption or pause of this funding happen during that time frame, and if partners have already done the work, knowing that it is a reimbursement process, just wanted to know how CDT will be kind of approaching that in the event of a pause of the funding, and will that reimbursement be grandfathered back for folks to get paid for the work that has already been completed? Just curious on how we can also navigate that to our own tier 2 subgrantees, given the uncertainty.
It's a good question. Let us circle back with you on that. I think, we did clarify that based on the federal and state requirements, that we would do quarterly reimbursement. And we did stipulate that, our ability to fulfill on the grants is ability to us accessing federal funds. but I think the nuance of your question is something that we've got to take back and we'll see if we can develop an answer for.
Yeah, Scott, can I also jump in, based on Natalie's question about the 2029 timeline? I'm also seeing some questions in the
Yeah,
chat about
thanks.
that. That is the maximum period of performance. So all subaward activities must end by August 31st, 2029. But, based on what we've heard in public comment, we are building in the flexibility for applicants to propose their own period of performance within that maximum. So if they feel like this funding is suitable for a 2.5-year period of performance or a 3-year period of performance, they can include that in their timeline and just make that clear. So we are including that flexibility. 2029 is the maximum.
Thank you, Alex. And that does answer a few of the questions that are in chat. Stephen Jackson has his hand up. If he could come off and ask his question live, please.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I had one of the questions around the kind of lead applicant versus second tier subgrantee. And just to provide a little bit more context, we're applying for track 1, and it's the county's kind of IT department who's been leading most of the broadband expansion and digital equity work as the lead applicant, but planning to partner with other departments and agencies to administer some of the activities within the same county. And just curious if those other agencies or departments would be considered second tier subgrantees, or kind of more broadly, are different departments within the same county considered second tier subgrantees?
I think I would say let us circle back with you on that. Is this just a verbal articulation of the question that was submitted early? And if so, thank you very much. I think,
yes.
Yeah, the nuances we're thinking about is if there's already like a hierarchical government entity, like a county administrative office or like the IT department, that if they were to apply and be awarded the grant, based on the competitive process, how would funding shared with other county departments be perceived, versus how would funds given to like nonprofits or other entities outside of the county apparatus? Those would definitely be perceived as second tier subgrantees. I think we're going to have to circle back on clarifying the distinction for sharing within other county departments.
Okay. Oh, good. Thanks. Appreciate the follow-up here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for following up with your question. There's a couple of questions about digital equity plans. One question was, do they have to have a digital equity plan before applying for the grant? And then the follow-up one, if they do have a digital equity plan, does CDT or OBDL have to approve it as meeting the does the pre-existing plan meet all the minimum requirements before a CalDEF award can be used for implementation?
Alex, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So definitely for the first question, applicants are not required to have a existing digital equity plan for before applying, right? This is a planning and a capacity grant. There's an allowance for funding that they can use for the planning process to develop the digital equity plan, or if they had one but it's outdated or it might not meet all the requirements that is laid out in the RFA, they can use some planning dollars to update it. If they already have a plan that they think already meets the minimum requirements, you can see the minimum requirements in the RFA. You can take a look at the STEP to check for alignment. That is something that they can upload and submit as part of their application. If you look at track 1, if you've been to the application, select track 1, go down to the funding track specific questions. There's an option to upload an existing plan. So upload that plan, describe your prior planning efforts, let CDT know that you're planning to use that to meet the minimum requirements, and move on to digital equity implementation. If awarded, CDT will take a look at that plan, make sure that meets requirements, and let you know if you can go ahead and proceed.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add on to that is that both pre-COVID pandemic and during and post-COVID pandemic, there was a lot of federal and state funding allocated for planning. And so wanted to just again make a distinction about the spirit of the track 2 planning plus capacity. We're looking at kind of geographic specific digital equity plans that go beyond just infrastructure deployment programs that include the non-deployment activities that kind of complete the continuum. And you know, when we're looking at the holistic nature of the track 2 program itself, we're not necessarily encouraging, you know, individual organizations to apply for funding to develop a digital equity plan for their organization. This is again a broader you know, perspective, driving down the focus that was identified in this, you know, collaborative planning process on the state plan, and then implementing you know, at a regional or local level.
Thank you, Scott. Rebecca, Palmer, please feel free to come off mute and come on camera and ask your question. Did we lose her?
Okay, there we go. Sorry,
There we
I
go.
was on mute for some reason. I was like, what's going on? Thank you very much for hosting this office hours. Rebecca Kaluma, Director of Digital Equity with the County of Los Angeles. I do have a question going back to the digital equity plan. Once the plan has been co-created, does CDT recommend that the plan gets adopted in any type of way? So for example, typically a lot of digital equity plans will get adopted if you're within a city by city council or by some type of governing body. And I think that adds a lot of validity to the plan. And also it allows shared ownership that we're supporting the plan, we're supporting the recommendations. And also it could perhaps maybe allow additional fundings outside of what we're looking at to maybe be supported. So I'm just curious to see if you guys have any recommendations for that, or if you guys are going to be encouraging any type of official adoption of the plan from some type of entity, if that makes sense.
Rebecca, it's not a requirement, but we acknowledge that it's a benefit and a value. I think what we learned during the planning process when we, you know, toured the state and did our 20 in-person, you know, regional workshops is that, you know, obviously there's a lot of variety between the counties in terms of size, geography, capacity, and where they're at. And, you know, we know there may be some areas where there's both a need to develop a plan and a desire to have it validated by, you know, a government entity or government entities for specifically for those purposes. So there's no prohibition against that, and I think that's would be a smart move in terms of sustainability. And there's also not a requirement.
Okay, thank you so much. And one other quick question in terms of convening. So I know NTIA initially was planning on having in-person convenings this year. There was supposed to be one in San Diego in March, but because of obvious reasons, we haven't had any convenings. And I know in terms of the next nationwide convening, where those that are in the digital equity space are going to be convening, will be next month in Gila River, which is administered by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So my question to you guys is, once the grantees have been selected, do you guys anticipate having any type of in-person convenings? I know that NTIA recently released guidelines that grant funds that are related to DEI cannot be utilized in that way. So I'm just curious to see like what ongoing engagement will look like. I think there's value in convening in person, especially for those of us that are going to be doing work across the state. So I'm just curious to see what your guys' plan is for in-person engagement across the different ecosystems.
Let's answer, and I answer that a couple of the different segments and then call James in to back clean up on that. Generally, we can't speak for the NTIA or what their plans are for in-person engagement. We have received some initial guidance about restrictions on certain kinds of travel, but are unclear about how that relates specifically to digital equity related travel. I think generally what we would say is that James, do you want to speak to how travel is addressed in the RFA?
Yeah, Scott, I was getting a lot of feedback on that. Is there any way we could, I could not hear your response and I could not fully hear the question.
Well, I think I'll go ahead and answer it. I think, Rebecca, the RFA clearly states that there may be some allowability of in-state travel, but CalDEP funds are not allowable to support out-of-state travel. And to your point about in person, we know that there is value in people getting together and are really trying to focus folks through the program design of the CalDEP that the funds be used specifically to like implement programmatic work at the regional and local level.
Okay, but you guys don't know so for example, if you were to include travel within the budget, it's my understanding that you cannot have it for any type of DEI, and I'm pretty sure just from what I've heard that digital equity does fall under it. So do you guys know if we're allowed to include that in the budget if it's like digital equity related convenings? Do you know what I'm saying? Or is that not allowed?
Yeah, so what I can say, there's a section in the maybe the RFA, but in the allowable and unallowable uses that potentially some state travel is permissible for CalDEP. Out-of-state travel is not. As it relates to any new guidance from NTIA, we are in receipt of some new guidance, but not enough to determine and answer the question for you is asked. So we're going to circle back on that, and when we have more information as it pertains to CalDEP, we'll either let you folks know at the next office hours, or we'll update the Q&A page sooner if we get an answer. But we don't have enough information to answer that question for you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. If one of the members of our team could drop the partner resource link into chat again, please. A couple questions coming through regarding how do organizations know who within their county is a partner or how to partner. Want to make sure that people have the link to that resource before we wrap up today. There's a general question about further or where we might find more information about what is considered a workforce partner. What is listed, they said specifically an entity that carries out a workforce development program. Is there a place we can help them find more information or the definition on that?
I think the best guidance that we can give on the definition of a workforce development program is what's in the notice of funding opportunity and what's in the RFA, and it's pretty broad. The thing that I would say is to go back to the state digital equity plan and look at the context with which workforce development is brought up, and that's as we all work to foster digital equity and accomplish overcome the three common goals, which are the the infrastructure and availability, which, the infrastructure programs are focusing on affordability and adoption, that, what are those springboards? So educational opportunities that can be empowered by people who are now connected and able to utilize technology and are trained and skilled to do that. What are digital knowledge-based training programs that can help, enhance people's career opportunities and, empower communities. And then, so that's what I would say to kind of focus on.
Scott, just to add to that, from a verification standpoint, I would look at our technical assistance page. We have a document titled List of Example Documents Certifying Eligible Entity Status. So if you're interested in understanding like what documentation we're looking for from an eligible entity that's a workforce development organization, take a look at that document because we have it for every single eligible entity category.
Thank you. My Zoom just blipped out completely, so I'm not sure how much I missed or if you noticed I was gone. So were we able to answer the question about the county as a lead applicant or joint, multiple counties applying together, where one county is the lead applicant, but the other counties are partners?
We did not answer that question yet. Can you rephrase the question, Maria?
Because I crashed out, so I don't know what you last heard.
And sorry, folks, Zoom is having naturally was having some issues. Maria, I think it would be helpful if we could ask the individual that asked that question to potentially come on.
It's Alex Tone asked the question. So Alex, if you're here and able to ask that question.
I think here's what I would suggest, Maria, is that within track one, each county geographic allocation is going to be allocated to that county geographic region, and it won't be split up or divided unless awarded to, one grantee who could then, sub-grant it out. And that's been designed based on what we heard about, during the planning process, where people wanted flexibility to have the appropriate partners, for their communities. We do allow for regional or multi-county applications to come in together. And I think, the guidance we could give is that as long as a lead applicant is one of the eligible entities, that one potential county could come in on behalf of other counties. They would just have to demonstrate and put together a competitive application and demonstrate that there was, support.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was not able to get off mute, so I appreciate that response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question, and this might be one that we need to refer them back directly into the RFA. The question is, can a lead applicant utilize a third party like a nonprofit to administer second-tier subgrantees? Would this third party be considered a contractor, a partner, or a second-tier subgrantee? And then we may want them to come off mute to ask this question if we need more clarity.
Yeah, I think we might have to take that one back. But
okay. So again, if we're unable to answer your questions today, please email us your questions to our CalDEP email address. And we're not going to be able to get through all our questions today. I am trying to find the questions that are programmatic specific versus sort of more generalized programmatic specific. I'm recognizing that we have about 5 minutes left. If there's someone that would like to raise their hand and ask one last question, we can consider that. And the rest of these we'll probably have to work with and follow up. So if anybody is brave enough. Or if
Yeah.
Hillary Thayer is here. Okay, Gina, please feel free to ask your question. We'll take your question.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all, and thank you for all your work. Okay, so my question was for the unhoused multi-home residents and very poor people. Internet services are just not a possibility. So only a hotspot and a device, a tablet or laptop would be a solution. Would that be part or qualify under digital equity? And the second part is communication is really, really critical. And so I'm just wondering, oh, sorry. Okay, I'm just wondering, is utilizing or have you all considered lifeline phones for communication and affordability? Would that fit?
Ms. Gates Lopez, thank you for that. I think now more than ever, like we're very cognizant about following federal guidance and, you know, throughout the process, we've tried to focus on, you know, the 8 covered populations that are mentioned in statute. During the planning process, we heard from many folks that there are potentially other population groups that are of key concern for communities and definitely key concern for the state, and that there's a lot of intersectionality within that focus. I think the response would be to applicants to focus on the 8 covered populations that are called out in the digital equity plan. And we already answered the device question earlier in terms of, you know, we understand that there are members of the of our population that are mobile only, or mobile is, you know, maybe a primary resources. And, you know, we suggest that folks focus on devices that empower people beyond mobile phones.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, is because the folks that are on the target area, many fall under this category. They're just very poor. They don't have $5 to spare for internet at home. So if we can't connect them to internet, then would they be considered not, and that they can't sustain it, would we consider them not a viable participant?
You know, I think we're now getting into like a level of specificity that we weren't really, you know, prepared to go on in terms of specific applications or specific. So I think what we would do is refer you to the digital equity plan, refer you to the RFA and the allowable and unallowable costs. You know, just to acknowledge that there's a great need here in the state, and that we're happy with the funding we've received, and we acknowledge that it's not nearly enough to address the need in the state.
Okay, thank you.
We thank you everybody for your questions. Again, if we did not get to your question, please submit it to our CalDEP email address. Thank you, James, Alex, and Scott. And I'm going to pass it back over to Ann Wynn to close out our session today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria, and thanks for the slide. Next slide, please. Thanks everyone for staying until now for our closing. We do have 3 more slides, and this will be posted online so that you can go back and refer to them. Just a quick reminder of our Q&A process. Many that we mentioned earlier, that the Q&A process allows potential applicants to ask questions regarding the RFA process and timeline, guidelines, application components and requirements. Do note that OBDO cannot give advice or answer questions that are specific to individual applications, as our RFA period is being opened. OBDO will respond to your questions with reference to existing materials, if you've heard so far, to the RFA or our portal. and the answers will be posted on a rolling basis on our Q&A page no later than May 16, so that you have ample time to incorporate the answers in your application. So, and the deadline to submit questions is May 9th. So keep that in mind as well, and I'll have that on the next slide. I'll pause real quick because I see Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. And I just wanted to, again, as just note to folks is that we endeavored to answer all of the questions to the best of our ability. And given the volume of questions that we're receiving and the similarity, please understand that in many cases we're batching like questions together and generalizing them and providing answers that address the common theme there. So just wanted to make sure folks were aware that if they asked a specific question and they didn't see it as phrased, that not to take it personally, but just look for the questions that most resemble the questions you asked, and we'll endeavor to answer those.
Thanks for the clarification, Scott. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of resources. You've noticed that we copy-paste many links throughout our conversation today. All of that is hyperlinked here. So definitely come back to this slide to access, but definitely the QR code will send you to our landing page where you can access the rest of the bullet points. So just a heads up. Next slide. And then here are some RFA next steps. We want you and encourage you to review the CalDEP web pages, the TA resources on the Broadband for All portal, read the grant guidelines on RFA for further clarifications, enter your information in the partnership coordination resource, which is optional, but as you've seen, could be very helpful to finding partners. Attend our next CalDEP office hours, which is scheduled to be on Wednesday, May 7th, same time at 2 p.m. And then in between or even after, send all your CalDEP questions to caldep@state.ca.gov by May 9th, no later than 5 p.m. And a big highlight, submit your application by the deadline, which is May 30th by midnight. So that wraps up all my slides. The last one is just a quick note for where to sign up for Broadband for All update that we sent out to all stakeholders on a monthly basis, and of course our CalDEP landing page. And with that, I conclude our first office hours for CalDEP, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.